Hello everyone, welcome to Moments for Mother Earth, and I'm Sanya. Through this podcast, we will talk about real stories, real people, and the small steps that can create big change for our planet. Today's episode is really special because it's about something we all love but often take for granted, our beaches. How we all dream about visiting beautiful beaches, clear blue water, golden sand, and peace. But what if I tell you that under that perfect view, there's plastic bottles, fishing nets, and even broken coral reefs? Today, I'm talking to someone who's not just seen it, she's actually out there fixing it. Garima Poonia, a woman who's leading cleanup drives, teaching people about ocean waste and inspiring thousands to take action. So, welcome to the show, ma'am.
Hi, Sanya. Thank you so much for having me here.
Okay, so you have done amazing work, but I'm curious how did it all started and what made you care so much about cleaning up our beaches and oceans?
So the first thing that I want to say is one of the biggest misconceptions people have about the work that Kachre Wale does when they hear about it, that we're just doing cleanups. And the word when Kachre Wale comes up, and the way people think about waste management is that somebody is going to litter, somebody is going to make it dirty, and Kachre Wale is going to clean it up. So that is not how we work. We are not an organization that just does cleanup drives or makes dirty places pretty, because that's a different kind of work. That's community work. And what we do is we're a professional waste management organization. So when we look at waste, when we look at addressing waste, we look at the whole system of why it is happening, what we can do about it. And it's not just a simple that today we went to the beach, we picked up some bags of trash, and we have no idea where the trash goes. A lot of beach cleanups unfortunately happen that way. There is no traceability of the waste, there is no protocol. So from that, like, this is the first thing that I want to sort of set out here during this session, is that we work as a waste management organization. In terms of how it started, 2017, I had visited the Andamans with my parents for the first time as a tourist. I was already working in waste management back then. And when I came to the islands, it was definitely the most beautiful place I had ever seen.
Yeah.
Crystal clear waters and, coral reefs and everything. And I think that just left a thought in my head that we need to do something with reference to waste here, because at that point in 2017 there was no waste management. Everything was just being burnt and dumped. So that's where the thought came in, and a year later I started the project.
Oh, so do you remember your first cleanup? Not what you collected, but what you felt.
um The first activity actually that we did was not a cleanup. It
Oh,
was an exercise that we did with the community members. It was a bit like a waste audit, a very simple one, where we were trying to understand how much waste do local people produce, and we wanted to compare it with the waste that tourists produce, because tourists produce a lot more.
yes.
And in terms of a cleanup drive, the first beach cleanup that I remember was with children. There were about 30 odd kids that had come from Port Blair. And I think the most amazing thing was that here are these kids who have come from another island, and all of them are passionate about keeping the beach clean. And before the beach cleanup, we had an activity. I actually can't remember if it was before the beach cleanup or after, but we had taken them to the local landfill. And very recently, one of those kids, and it's been 7 years, she reached out to me and she said, "You know, what you told us that day, you took us to the landfill, we were in the beach cleanup, that was something that I have never forgotten. And it still impacts how I make choices in my life to this day." So I think that's something that I remember, how the kids reacted to everything.
That's so cute. So, you done something most people avoid, waste, into your life mission. So, what made you choose that path instead of walking away?
So that question, there's an assumption that most people avoid waste, which is true, unfortunately, only around the Indian subcontinent largely. Um, and what I mean by that is during our cleanups and through our interaction with tourists, we see that foreign tourists are much more likely to join beach cleanups and, in general, not to litter than Indians. For Indians, due to a mix of factors, and wherein caste is one of the biggest factors that has played into this kind of a perception, where cleaning waste is not my job, it's somebody else's job, it's below my dignity, and somebody from a lower caste should be doing it. It is some kind of untouchable work. And very strongly feel that even though caste discrimination is reducing,
Yes.
I would say in certain ways, but this kind of a mindset still prevails. People think of waste as something dirty, which is why we named our NGO Kachre Wale, because we wanted to sort of challenge that taboo around, that term. So, in the last 10 years, there's a lot of difference. A lot of people have been taking interest in waste. And the reason that I got into this sector was I wanted to work in an area where I could work towards women's rights and environment. So when I started, waste management was about integrating women waste pickers, who are, by the way, most often from Dalit communities, and they form 80% of the waste pickers in the country. That we can integrate them into new solid waste management systems, give them better wages, better working conditions, and at the same time also work towards solving the problem of waste. Back when I had started nearly 10 years ago, waste was not a hip thing to work on, but things have changed. Yeah.
So, did you ever feel like scared that your idea wouldn't work, that people wouldn't care?
That anybody who works in waste, we know this is a challenge. We have to, people will not care. We already know this is a challenge in waste. So any waste management organization that starts in a place, they know that we will, this is how people's mindsets are. And in fact, in my experience and a lot of other people who work in waste, the experience is that more educated people are, they are the ones that give more trouble. They are the ones that don't want to segregate their waste, or they think it's below their dignity. Working with rural populations has been far easier for us. And even working with people from the lower economic sections, they actually listen. They will segregate waste. Once they understand what they need to do, they'll do it. The educated ones can absolutely, they can be really mean. And they're also sometimes very, not sometimes, very often disrespectful to people who come to, collect waste. So we assume that people are not going to care. And this is a challenge that any organization working in waste looks at, and we try to solve it with behavior change campaigns. So that's always integrated in, I mean, any organization doing work in this sector will work on behavior change practices, initiatives.
Well, that really means you need a lot of motivation and enthusiasm to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess anybody who, starts out doing anything, not just in the social sector space, but I would say especially, because the whole reason we're doing something is because there is a problem, right? And
Yeah.
we are trying to attack that problem, change that problem. And one of the biggest problems in waste is exactly this, that people don't care. Or that people think it's, below their dignity to be doing anything about this. So and this is one of the biggest challenges for waste in India. I mean, we have a huge littering problem, and we need a lot more behavior change for people to, not litter, not be spreading waste here and there, and using dustbins.
So when we scroll through social media, the beaches look like picture perfect. But you have been there underwater on the ground. You have seen what really is happening. So can you tell us what the situation actually look like?
Um, I think because most people are so used to, especially in this side of the world, looking at cities with so much litter, or hearing stories about places like Bombay or urban beaches, right? And they look dirty. That Andaman's looks, in comparison, really beautiful. Because in comparison, yes, there is lesser waste, but also public beaches in Andamans are very few. Most of the beaches come in the reserve forest or marine national park areas where people can't go.
Oh,
And the public beaches, usually, especially in the last 2 3 years, also because of the work that we have been doing, beach cleanups are happening a lot more often, so they seem relatively cleaner. However, if you go to these reserve forest marine national parks and also public beaches, I'm not saying they're spick and span clean, but because somebody like the panchayat or someone does a cleanup every day, so a certain stretch of it, 100 meters, 200 meters, will look clean. But we have done cleanups in reserve forest beaches, picked up 200 kgs of trash, and within the next tide, we've seen more than that come onto the beach. It's really heartbreaking. So in Andamans, the issue is that marine litter, the waste on the beach is a sea to land issue. We get waste from at least 20 countries. This is not local origin waste. So this just keeps coming in with the tide. And I've been to islands and marine national parks as part of our organization's collaborative initiatives with the Forest Department in Andamans. And there's just tons and tons of waste lying on these islands. Human activity is almost negligible, but still there is so much waste. And the beaches are stunning. I mean, it feels like you've traveled back in time, but there is just so much waste. So yeah, it does look pretty, and some of it, seems pretty because also people only go to the touristy areas, that little patch, 100 meters, which is a public beach. Most people will not, especially Indians, will not go left, right of that. But in reality, there is a lot of trash.
okay. So when you dive underwater, do you see beauty or damage first?
The first dive that I did, and diving course is in such a way that you first learn to dive up till 18 meters, and then you learn to dive up to 30 meters. And the only reason back when I'd come with my parents, I wanted to do up till 30 was because I knew, because of the 2004 tsunami and because of global warming events. I was told by people, knew a couple of people in the Andamans, that life below 18, I mean, the deeper dives is going to be much nicer. So that whole 18-meter section, when I was doing, my memories are of a lot of bleached and broken corals, just white skeletons, and heartbreaking, because just a few years ago all of that, was very much alive. And then when I did go to, up to 30 meters, and then when you realize the difference, where every inch of a coral reef is so much life, there is just so much happening, there are thousands of fishes, there is so much variety. There's big fish, there's small fish, there's things on the corals. And actually, Coral reefs are even more varied in their ecosystem, more diverse than a rainforest. So if you pick up, let's say, a 1 meter of, 1 square meter of a rainforest and 1 square meter of a coral reef will have more life, more diversity. So it's that rich. So whenever I go to dive, it's both things, I mean, it is stunningly gorgeous, yes, but the damage is very evident. Both of the things, go side by side.
So, as you mentioned, coral reefs. So, coral reefs are literally breaking apart because of pollution. So, what does that destructions look like to someone who is there, and how does pollution from beaches and human activities affect coral reefs?
So, the way that we understand it, of course, global warming is a huge issue, huge reason why corals are dying. Because, I mean, just imagine, for example, if suddenly humans had an infection, or, they had fever, right? And how long can you survive in fever? I mean, sometimes people think, what's the big deal? 1 degree Earth will, warm up 2 degrees. But if a person has 100 degrees Celsius fever for 3 weeks, that person is going to be very sick, very exhausted. Now, to put that same analogy on coral reefs, they have gone through several, and in Andamans, at least three major bleaching events in the last couple of decades. Three at least that I know of. It could be more. And so when it's heating up, things are dying because they're not meant to survive in that temperature, right? That's not their core temperature. The second thing that happens is, because global warming is happening, one of the things we're doing, the carbon content, we're releasing so much carbon, which was earlier trapped in life forms, trapped in the earth. Now it's all up in the air. Now, it can't stay up in the air, all of it. Most of the carbon that we are releasing is absorbed by the ocean. When that happens, one, the temperature increases. Second, the ocean starts becoming acidic. So these corals are practically in an acid bath. So they are not just getting bleached, but the salinity, their ecosystem is, it's not just temperature, it's becoming acidic. And corals take, they, calcium, limestone, these are the kind of building blocks for corals. So what happens if you put calcium and acid? It disintegrates. That is what is
Yes.
happening to them. So of course they're going to be a lot more susceptible to breaking. And then in global warming, unfortunately, most of the talk is around carbon, but global warming is also one of the biggest issues. As big as carbon is contamination and pollution. So all the sewage that is going into the ocean, all the factories that are pumping their chemicals into the ocean, the shampoo that we use, the detergents that we use, everything is finding its way into the ocean. All of that is also impacting these coral reefs, and plastic is one of these many pollutants. So some pollutants you can see. Plastic, of course, you can see when it's in big pieces. When it's in microplastics, you can't. And some you can't even see. And when it comes to plastics, just to bunch of facts about the what happens to coral reefs when plastic comes in contact with them. So if there are microplastics, corals can actually eat the microplastic. They mistake it for food, and then they're not able to eat actual food. And when they eat microplastics, they're also ingesting a lot of chemicals. One of the most well kept secrets by the industry, and when I say industry, I mean the petrochemical agencies who make plastic, and the brands, all these brands that market these goods, chocolates, chips, snacks, everything, who make these products, and even clothes. They don't want us to know how much toxins are there in plastic.
Plastic.
We know
Yes.
right now that there are 16,000 chemicals at least that are used to make plastics. No company, no brand, no plastic making industry has released this information um, voluntarily, and they still don't release a lot of information citing patent laws. So it's other organizations that have done a lot of work. So there could actually be a lot more. Now, in all of these 16,000, we know for sure that 4,200 are hazardous to health, to ecosystems. They are toxic. They can cause cancer, they can cause infertility, your organs to swell up, brain damage, and so many studies on animals have actually shown a lot of damage. So imagine now that plastic, when it's in the water, it's not just plastic, it's all these chemicals that are going in, the corals are eating that. Then there is the whole issue of just ghost gear, fishing gear, that's in the ocean. And fishing gear, by the way, tends to make up 50% at least of all plastic trash that is in the ocean. And fish The pollution from fishing, sometimes people think it's the small fishermen who are going out making their livelihood, that they are the cause of it. And sometimes a lot of people also talk about how eating fish because of this problem is you're contributing to this. But most of this pollution in the ocean which comes from fishing is actually from commercial fishing, because they use very intense, very big infrastructure. Imagine a huge boat coming in. They have a net which is 1 kilometer deep, right? And it has weights tied at the end of it. So it goes down all the way to the ocean floor. And then when the boat moves, the net is dragging. So the net, when it moves, it's destroying everything that is in its way because of the drag. Now, when a regular fisherman goes out, a small scale fisherman, they will be using a fishing line or a small net. And I'm not saying that doesn't cause damage, but the disparity between the damage caused by commercial fishing and the damage caused by small fishermen is huge. And these nets can strangle corals. We've seen where this year only we took out a net. We collaborated with a local dive center, Turquoise Dreams. And I remember Raju called me, gave me a call. Is like, Garima, you have to come to the jetty right now. We've got a really big net. And he sounded quite urgent. So I went, and they were taking out the net. When I went, they had just started, and it was just unending. When we measured it, it was half a square kilometer, one single net. And it took them two dives, 8 people cumulatively. If I put down the time taken by each diver, that's like 7 to 10 hours of time to take out that net. And there were so many shells stuck in the net. They were dead because they're stuck, they can't move out. uh, every time it moves around the coral, it's going to cause abrasion, it's going to cause something to break. So it's just constantly causing damage. So yeah, this is just, I mean, I hope that gives a context to how bad plastic is in the water, physically as well, and chemically and biologically too.
It's so much heartbreaking to listen all this. So, do you think people would care more if they saw what you see every day?
Mm, yes, it would have an impact, but it's not enough. I think with technology and with globalization, with the way that our education systems have changed, our our way of living has changed. We have forgotten how to have relationships with anything that is not human, and we only think of life in terms of human form. There are people I have met, like I'll give an example, and I talk about this example a lot. At, at Neil Island, where I live, I was trying to find cow's milk. I didn't want to keep buying packaged milk. And it was being very hard. So, somebody who's from mainland India, from a very urban place, asked me that where you live, the landlords have a cow. Why can't you take milk from her? I said, because the cow is not pregnant, she doesn't have a child. And this person says, so what? And it took me a few seconds, and I realized this person doesn't have any idea how this works. For them, a cow is just a milk producing machine. That the cow can give milk only when it has a baby is something they're not thinking of. You ask kids in cities, where does water come from? They're going to say a tap. They have no concept that it's coming from a river. somewhere, or the effort that goes into getting the water from that river to the tank to your house, or how it comes from underground. So one, yes, we're not seeing these things, but even when we see them, and people will come, and the way they are, like tourists will come, or even the way people are living these days, there's so much internet, so much consumerism, that we are not making relationships with nature around us. My generation, and of course people from generations before me did this even better. um, I still have trees that I'm friends with. Fights that I've picked with my parents when a certain tree was being cut down, right? And I cried. I was like, no, you can't, because I grew up with this tree, and it's not okay. There are birds that I want to see. There. I go to the beach. I talk to the ocean, and all of these things sound really stupid to people who've been brought up in a very corporate kind of a globalized economy. Um, but if we look at how indigenous people have lived, how even non-indigenous communities have lived in the last few hundred years, and of course before that, and by indigenous I mean, for Indian context, it's people, Adivasi people in America, it could be the Native Americans, the Aboriginals in Australia. I mean, most places have had their indigenous people. They don't, some of them don't even have a word for nature, because there is no distinction between myself and nature. Like, how are these two different things? The moment you create that distinction, it's something else that I can destroy, that I can use, that I can utilize as a resource. But if a tree or a landscape, if a mountain, I have a relationship with them and I recognize them as living beings, I'm much less likely to cause damage to them. So I think what I'm trying to say is, seeing is not enough. The way we are seeing is perhaps more important. Everybody sees, but how are we seeing it? Do I look at a pretty place and do I just think of a vacation that I want when I think of that place, or do I look at a place and I'm like, wow, I wish more places were like that, right? I mean, it really, and that thinking is really, we're
Important.
losing that thinking. Yeah, yeah.
So, if the ocean could speak, what do you think it would say to us right now?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, you ask one person to speak for the ocean. Um, Interestingly, though, um, I was reading a book written by an Australian Aboriginal author, and they did have a custom where there were speakers for different things in nature. So, for example, a particular constellation will have a speaker, and these people will speak for that constellation or for another element in nature. And I think they'd be a lot more. By they, I mean indigenous people would have a much more um, clear answer to this. But I mean, if I had to think of it, I mean, I guess it would just be sad. Humans are this one species which is knowingly causing damage to itself. So it's kind of sad and stupid, maybe some irony, and it would just probably ask us, what do you think you're doing? And I mean, how long do you think you're going to survive like this, right? And at what cost? Does human, and this is not even survival anymore, right? We don't need luxury to survive. So I mean, we've killed 70% of wildlife in the last 50 years. That's what we've done in the name of, development. So I don't know what it would say, but I think it would be sad and amused at the same time at this weird species. Yeah.
Okay. So, my
Not,
next
not,
question.
not, not at a, sorry, not at, I'm going to just rephrase that. I don't think humans are a weird species. I think in the last few hundred years, the kind of development trajectory that some nations have taken and forced upon the globe, that is what has made us weird. Because I think, we have lived on this earth for thousands of years and not caused this kind of damage. So I think it's the way that we're living now That is the problem. Yeah.
So in the name of development, they are just destroying our nature. So
Destroying
what's
themselves, not just
yeah.
nature, because we can survive without nature.
So what's one habit that looks small but can use big harm to nature? Like what are some simple steps people can take to protect coral reefs and ocean life?
I mean, currently there are so many things we do every day, so many habits which are harmful because unfortunately the way um, modern society is functioning, there's very little that we do that does not cause harm. But let's say if I had to pick one example, we use too many chemicals, too many, whether it's soap, detergents, toothpaste, shampoos. We don't really need this much. And a lot of workshops that I have with both children and adults, and we do a lot of exercises to sort of think, what did people do before this? Why is this important? And personally, I haven't bought detergent in 7 years. um, a lot of times I don't even use toothpaste. I make tooth powder. The tooth powder recipe was given to me by Kedar, who runs Green Communities Foundation in Mumbai. One of the things we really like to do is, come up with these homemade alternatives and simple ones. None of these also take time, by the way. I haven't, I can't remember the last time I used soap to take a bath. It's been a very long time. And shampoo is, I mean, maybe in an entire year, I probably use one bottle of shampoo. That's about it. Soap, I mean, these are little things we can change. The alternatives are so easy. We've been living like that again for thousands of years. Nobody needs complicated material. You don't even need to buy fancy, sustainable kind of, things, which brands claim are organic and this and that. You can just make the stuff at home. It's that easy, and it takes a few minutes. Literally nothing that I do takes more than that much time. It's not complicated. So this probably, I would say, is one of the habits, that we change when then we're not putting chemicals in I mean, we're putting a lot less chemicals in the water. And obviously then, we're also not generating that much plastic waste. So this is one example that comes to my mind.
Okay. So what's something you wish every school taught about the environment?
How to be friends with trees and birds and the ocean, and how to relate to them, and not just factually, like, I mean, like how to really talk to them, spend time in nature, sit under a tree canopy and just look at birds, get bored in a garden, in the forest. I think that is what schools need to do.
Okay. So have you ever said no to a collaboration because it didn't align with your values, like in this industry?
Yes, yes, multiple times. Although having said that, it's not easy. Sometimes you have to make compromises. I mean, you
Yes.
always have to make compromises, actually. That is the nature of the work. But sometimes, when the compromises are too high, then we don't want to do it. Sometimes there are agencies that want us to just do a beach cleanup. That's it, just a beach cleanup. And we don't usually like that unless we also get funds to be able to transport that waste properly to the mainland, because nothing gets recycled in the Andamans. So that's what we tell them: if you're going to do it, every single piece of plastic, or whatever we collect, has to reach its final destination as per law. And if that can't happen, then we don't want to do it. So that's one example of how we look at collaborations.
Oh. So if you could share one message with everyone who feels too small to make a difference, what would it be?
um it does feel small, yes. And I'm taking a little time with that question, because also the way that corporates and brands and petrochemical agencies want us to think is that we create the problem because we don't put it in the dustbin. That is why waste is a problem. But even if all of us put everything in the dustbin and we sent it for processing, a good 40% of waste of plastic is not even recyclable. And this is it's important to know this. I know it still makes you feel small, but it also helps you understand that this problem was not created by me as a person. This problem, yes, is a much bigger problem than I can solve by my own. Does individual action matter? Yes, not just because it reduces waste, since we're talking about waste, but it leads to a lot of internal psychological emotional change. When I started doing these alternative things like using soap nuts instead of detergent to wash my clothes, or taking a bath with besan and rice powder, I started looking at natural materials in a very different way, and I understand them better and I create my own things, right? Like now I know what my body needs, what my hair needs, what my skin needs. I'm not dependent on a corporate to tell me what I should do to my body. And I have then turned, in a certain extent, from a consumer to a human and a creator. So, if you're feeling small, that is very real, first, and that is the truth. It is a very big problem. But the joy of taking these changes, doing something, it's not just because we're solving the problem, it leads to internal change. So, for that, I think, yes, it's small, but it's big at the same time, if that makes sense.
It really does. So, if every company had to follow just one sustainability rule, what should that be?
Mm, so when you say that, what do you mean? Like, for example, in their offices, or like, would can you elaborate on that question a little bit?
Something like plastic companies and the companies that are just providing a lot of plastic to the customers, to their customers, like before you mentioned.
Um, I mean, they should not be using so many chemicals in plastic. That is one. And the irony is that they'll probably not even be able to make plastic if they don't use those chemicals, which is why this information doesn't come often in mainstream media. It's kept very subdued, and very few people know about it. Although the research is available on the internet, research is available very freely. There's this lovely documentary that came out, which has won several awards, must watch for everybody. It's called Plastic People, which talks about exactly these things, the toxins in plastic. But to plastic producing agencies, yeah, but I don't know how they're ever going to get past their profit making intentions. So the Global Plastics Treaty, which was supposed to come out recently, it the one of the biggest issues there was that the companies did not want any regulation on chemicals in plastic, and they did not want any regulations that force companies to reduce plastic production. So there's a large chunk of countries that wanted these regulations, and this smaller chunk of countries, but with much bigger corporate and lobbying power, and plastic companies representatives who said, no, let's just recycle it away, even though 40% at least of waste is plastic is not recyclable. Um, so yeah, but this is like, I think we're talking khayali pulao. This won't happen. But on a smaller scale, I guess if all companies with their employees could have these sessions where they move away from using a lot of the plastic products, if companies had protocols where, let's say, you can't wear synthetic clothes, right? Polyester. It's plastic. It's bleaching chemicals in your body. Polyester clothing is responsible for more than 30% of microplastic pollution of the ocean. And a culture that encourages wearing old and secondhand clothes and repaired clothes. These are some maybe two, three things that come to my mind.
Okay. So, before we wrap it up, is it possible to be fully sustainable today, or is just that a dream or a khayali pulao?
Uh, there are people who do it, but fully sustainable would also mean that you are not on the grid, not using electricity, because most
Oh,
electricity comes from non-renewable sources. And very recently, in fact, just around the time when Jane Goodall, she died around the same time. Can't remember her name, but another woman, she's from Pune or Bombay, who has been living without electricity for decades. She also passed away, and she worked in the conservation sector. It is possible, yes, but like this whole concept of 100% sustainable is difficult, not because people don't want to, but because of the way our entire economy is structured. So if that has to happen, a lot more initiatives need to come down from the government, and from, we have to change the way that we live. But that shouldn't stop us from trying to be sustainable. It is not a 0 or 100 game. It's not an either or game. We should try to be more sustainable, because at the end of the day, it's not charity. It's going to give health benefits, emotional, psychological, mental benefits, monetary benefits to ourselves when we do it. So it's really a win-win that way.
so I love that. Change doesn't need to be huge; it's just need to start. Thank you
Yeah,
so much,
needs to
Garima ma'am.
start.
Thank you so much, Garima ma'am, for joining and reminding us that the planet doesn't need heroes; it just need people who care. So, thank you.
Thanks for having me. It was really nice chatting with you.
Thank you, ma'am.